Everyone laughed when young Madison touched the roaring engine in the crowded garage. Foreman Jackson sneered, certain she would fail. But seconds later, Madison did what nobody could believe. In that split moment, everything changed forever. This is not just a story about a mechanic's daughter. It is a story about courage, defying expectations, and proving that true talent cannot be ignored. Watch closely, because what happens next will shock you beyond words. Before we start, like this video and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. Now let's begin. The hot Texas sun beat down on the steel beams of Miller and Sons Auto Garage. Inside, the air buzzed with the whirring of power tools, the clang of metal, and the loud, smug laughter of Foreman Jackson Pierce. His voice echoed through the building like a gavel, commanding attention whether people liked it or not. He was built like a linebacker, with a faded tattoo of a wrench on his forearm and years of grease buried under his fingernails. "Keep your hands off the engine, kid," Jackson barked, his eyes narrowing toward a teenage girl standing near Bay 3. Madison Cole stood quietly beside her father, Wes, a humble and soft-spoken mechanic who had worked there for almost 2 decades. Madison wore a baggy hoodie, oil-splattered jeans, and a ball cap pulled low over her short dark hair. Her eyes, however, burned with something rare, an intensity that most of the workers at Miller and Sons had never seen, especially not in someone so young. She was 17, quiet, observant, but not ordinary. Earlier that morning, her school had closed due to a water main break, so Wes had brought her along, thinking she would sit in the office and read like usual. But today, Madison wandered. She listened. She watched. And then she stepped forward. She had seen Jackson struggling with the V8 performance rebuild for over 2 hours. Even with 2 assistants, he had been unable to align the timing chain without the entire thing slipping out of position. It was a complicated job, and Jackson's frustration showed in the way he hurled tools and cursed under his breath. Madison stepped closer. She stared at the exposed engine block with a quiet focus, tilting her head the way musicians do when they hear something out of tune. She reached forward slowly, almost reverently, until Jackson noticed. "What do you think you are doing?" he growled, his voice rising with mockery. Wes turned, startled. "Maddie, maybe do not." But it was too late. With the entire shop watching, Madison touched the timing gear. Her fingers moved with precision, as if she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind. Jackson rolled his eyes and crossed his arms, muttering something under his breath about kids these days. But then everything changed. Her hand adjusted the cam sprocket slightly to the left. She rotated the crankshaft exactly 45 degrees and slipped the chain over the gear teeth so smoothly that even the senior mechanics stopped what they were doing. A hush fell over the shop. Every movement she made was intentional, calculated. Jackson's smirk faded. Wes stepped closer, eyes wide. "How did you—" "I saw the pattern," Madison said softly, not looking up. Nobody moved. The engine was aligned, perfectly, and what she did next would leave them breathless. Madison did not speak. She just reached over to the socket wrench on the tray and began tightening the bolts along the timing cover. Her hands did not shake. Her breath did not falter. She moved with the precision of a master technician, someone far beyond her years. The other mechanics stood frozen, staring. Jackson, once laughing, now looked like someone who had seen a ghost. "You cannot just walk in here and pretend to know engines," he muttered, stepping closer, trying to reassert his dominance. "This is not some school science project. These are real machines." Madison finally looked up. "It is not pretending if you understand it better than you do." The room fell into stunned silence. Wes's heart thudded in his chest. He had taught Madison things over the years. Basic engine parts, how to change oil, replace filters, but nothing like this. He had never shown her how to handle a performance rebuild, and yet here she was, completing a task Jackson had failed to do for hours. "Back up," Jackson growled. "Let me see that." Madison stepped away. Jackson leaned in. He scanned the alignment marks, the chain tension, the bolt torque, every detail, and it was flawless. One of the mechanics, a man in his 30s named Travis, whispered under his breath, "She really did it." Jackson straightened up slowly, face reddening, fists clenched. He was not used to being shown up, especially not by a teenager. He turned toward Wes. You taught her that? No, Wes replied, still in disbelief. I do not know how she learned. Madison tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I read the manual you left on the table last week. Then I watched a video on engine timing, and I memorized the diagrams. Jackson let out a hollow laugh. You think this is some kind of joke? It is not a joke, said a deep voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. A tall man in a navy blue polo stepped inside the garage. Clean cut, clipboard in hand, sunglasses hanging from his collar. His name tag read, Chris Langford, Regional Director. Chris looked around, his eyes scanning the scene. I was passing through for a surprise audit. What is going on here? Jackson quickly put on his best professional face. Just correcting a situation. A child got a little too curious. Chris glanced at the engine, then at Madison. She did this? Jackson scoffed. She just touched it. I fixed it. Chris nodded slowly, then walked over. He ran his fingers along the gear, checked the chain, examined the torque specs. After a full minute of silent evaluation, he stepped back. Whoever did this has better hands than most certified techs I have seen in 20 years. Nobody spoke. Chris looked directly at Madison. Was it you? Madison hesitated, then nodded. Chris smiled. Interesting, he said. You might want to see what she can really do. What he said next would flip the entire garage upside down. Chris turned toward the group and said, I want everyone to clear the floor. Give her the tools. Let us see what she can really do. Jackson's face twisted. With all due respect, sir, she is not certified. This is against protocol. Chris raised an eyebrow. And your certified hands could not time this engine correctly in 2 hours. She did it in under 5 minutes. So unless you would like to explain that to the board, I suggest you take a step back. The other mechanics shuffled away, unsure whether to look amused or terrified. Madison looked up at her father. Wes nodded slowly, stunned but proud. She was now in the spotlight, and there was no going back. Chris pulled a key fob from his pocket and pressed a button. From the service bay next door, a bright red Dodge Challenger rolled in, its hood already popped. Brand new Hemi-Fear 8. The owner is a collector. Engine rattle. Nobody has been able to figure out why. He tossed the fob to Madison. Show me what you have got. The air grew heavy. Jackson's jaw clenched as he crossed his arms, while Wes took a slow step back, his heart caught between fear and awe. The entire garage stood still, as if the walls were holding their breath. Madison walked over to the Challenger, climbed up on the platform, and began inspecting the engine. She looked like she belonged there. Her fingers danced across the engine mounts, coil packs, and cylinder heads like an artist studying a canvas. She closed her eyes for a second, then reached under the engine block and tapped it twice. There is a harmonic balancer misalignment, she said quietly. Quarter-inch shift on the crankshaft pulley. It is vibrating under torque. Chris narrowed his eyes. That would not show up on diagnostics. Madison looked back at him. But it can be heard if you know what frequency to listen for. The silence that followed was deeper than anything before. Then Chris clapped once, a sharp sound that snapped through the air. Incredible, he said. Fix it. She did not hesitate. Within minutes, she had the pulley aligned, replaced the worn belt, and recalibrated the tensioner. Her sleeves were covered in oil, but her eyes gleamed with focus. She ran the diagnostic tool. 0 faults. Engine smooth as silk. Chris looked around at the silent team. Anyone here want to question her now? No one answered, but Jackson was not done. His pride had taken a hit too big to swallow. He stepped forward, voice tight with sarcasm. You know, we do not just need mechanics. We need drivers, real test drivers. If she is so good with engines, let us see how she handles horsepower. Wes's eyes widened. That is not a good idea. Chris tilted his head. Actually, it might be the best idea yet. What happened next would put Madison in a position no teenager had ever faced in that garage, and the result would stun everyone beyond belief. The garage doors rolled open, revealing the track behind the facility. It was a private testing loop a quarter-mile strip used only for high-performance diagnostics and final checks. A crowd had already begun forming. Mechanics, engineers, even front office staff, all drawn in by the impossible question: could a teenage girl really handle a high-powered performance car better than certified professionals? Jackson tossed the keys to a sleek black Camaro parked near the entrance. This one has over 650 horsepower. Not just anyone can control it. Let her try this. She wants to be taken seriously, right? Chris turned to Madison. You do not have to do this. Madison stepped forward without blinking. I want to. Wes grabbed her arm gently. Sweetheart, it is different from an engine on a stand. If you miscalculate, I have been behind a wheel since I was 8, Dad, she said softly. Just never on this kind of track. Chris smiled. Then make this your first. The Camaro roared to life with a low, menacing growl. Madison climbed in, adjusted the seat, checked the mirrors, and put her hands firmly on the wheel. The moment her fingers touched the leather, something shifted in the air. She was not just a kid anymore. She was a force. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. She floored it. The tires screeched against the asphalt as the Camaro launched forward like a missile. Madison gripped the wheel, her eyes locked on the road ahead, unfazed by the power vibrating beneath her. The first turn came fast. She tapped the brakes, shifted down, and took it clean, like she had driven this route 100 times before. Inside the garage, jaws dropped. She hit the straightaway and opened the throttle. The engine howled as the car surged past 130 miles per hour, hugging the track with a precision that no one expected. She downshifted again, took the final corner flawlessly, and returned to the garage in just under 52 seconds. Chris checked the stopwatch. His eyebrows rose. That beats the shop record by 3 seconds, he said. Jackson was pale. Madison stepped out of the car, not with arrogance, but calm composure. She walked toward the group, eyes steady, hands shaking just slightly from adrenaline. Wes looked like he was holding back tears. Chris clapped slowly, then faster. Others joined in. Soon the entire garage was cheering. But then Chris raised his hand to silence them. He walked over to Madison and pulled a small envelope from his coat pocket. This, he said, was meant for our next apprentice. We had interviews lined up all month, but I do not need them anymore. You already passed every test. He handed the envelope to Madison. Inside was a full sponsorship offer, tuition, housing, and guaranteed placement at one of the top mechanical engineering programs in the country. Tears welled up in her eyes. Jackson turned to leave, but Chris stopped him. You laughed at her when she touched an engine. You will not do that to anyone here again. You are dismissed. Jackson froze. You are firing me? Chris nodded. I am freeing space for someone who respects real talent. As Jackson walked out, the crowd parted. Wes wrapped his arms around Madison. I told you that you were meant for more. And she was. Because that garage would never be the same again. Nor would she. The girl who was mocked for touching an engine had just rewritten the entire playbook, and the world had only just begun to see what she could do. The story is ended. Now let us begin the lesson. Sometimes greatness is not loud. It does not walk in wearing a suit or announce itself with a title. Sometimes it is a teenage girl in overalls, standing quietly near an engine, while everyone around her laughs. What happened inside that garage was not just a moment of technical brilliance. It was a moment that shattered stereotypes, rewrote expectations, and reminded everyone that talent knows no boundaries. Lena was not supposed to succeed, not in the eyes of the foreman, not in the eyes of the mechanics, and certainly not in the eyes of those who judged her by her age, her gender, or her background. But she did succeed, not because someone handed her the opportunity, but because she claimed it herself, with courage, confidence, and knowledge that no one expected her to have. This story is a lesson in humility for those who think they can judge someone by their appearance. It is a wake-up call to all who believe that expertise comes only with age or uniform, and it is an inspiration to every young person who has ever been told they are too small, too young, too inexperienced. Because sometimes the one everyone underestimates is the one who ends up changing everything. Never doubt your worth because others cannot see it yet. Never wait for permission to shine. Sometimes all it takes is one bold step forward, one moment of courage to flip the entire narrative. The world might not be ready for your light. Shine anyway, because the same people who laugh today might be the ones clapping tomorrow. And that is the real power of believing in yourself.